On a frozen back road, a wealthy young woman dumps a cardboard box and drives away. Inside, a starving German Shepherd mother clings to two trembling puppies, out of time, out of hope. Then a lone veteran in a brown coat and red and black plaid stops when no one else will. He scoops the puppies up and brings them home. But the storm isn't the real danger, because someone is coming back for what the mother dog is carrying, and they'll break down his door to get it. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if compassion still matters, subscribe, and stay with us. The winter road didn't look like a road anymore. It looked like a long white scar cut through the forest-packed snow, gray ice, and a thin mist that turned every pine trunk into a ghost standing at attention. The sky hung low and colorless, as if someone had washed the blue right out of it. A dark SUV slid to the shoulder with the quiet confidence of money. Its tires crunched, then stopped. The engine idled like a patient predator. Madison Pierce leaned out of the driver's window. She was young late 20s, beautiful in the way magazines approved of. Her coat was expensive charcoal wool, her gloves pale and spotless, her knit cap pulled down over blonde hair that had never known the sting of real cold for long. The wind nipped at her cheeks anyway, as if winter itself disliked her perfume. In her lap sat a cardboard box. The box moved. Not much, just a trembling ripple at the top flap, like something inside had breathed and the breath had nowhere to go. Madison stared at it as if it were a bill she didn't want to pay. "Come on," she muttered. "Just be quiet." A soft whine answered her. Madison's mouth tightened. She looked down the empty road left and right, as if expecting a camera crew to pop out of the trees and accuse her of being the villain in her own story. No one came. Only the forest watched, silent, ancient, indifferent. Madison opened the door. Cold hit her like a slap. She stepped out, boots sinking slightly in the snow, and lifted the box with both hands. The cardboard was damp at the corners, softened by melt and fear. Inside, two tiny German Shepherd puppies huddled together like burnt little loaves of bread, black and tan, eyes barely open, bodies shaking. Their ears were still too soft to stand. They smelled like milk and panic. Beneath them, pressed low against the bottom of the box, lay their mother. She was German Shepherd too, but winter had carved her down to bone and shadow. Her ribs rose like a washboard under dull fur. Her eyes were wide and dark, not pleading in a cute way, pleading in a way that made Madison uncomfortable, because it wasn't asking for affection, it was asking for mercy. The mother tried to lift her head. Her body trembled. One front paw dragged like it didn't belong to her anymore. Madison flinched. She hated that flinch. It made her feel like the kind of person she swore she wasn't. "This is not my problem," she said to the box. Like the box could argue back, but the mother's eyes did argue. Not with anger, not with teeth, with endurance. Madison turned sharply, as if she could outrun that look. She carried the box to the edge of the road and set it on the snow, close to the trees where the wind was slightly softer. The puppies squeaked. The mother's nose moved, tasting the air, searching for something. Safety. Food. A person who didn't leave. Madison reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, then stopped. If she called animal control, there would be questions. If she drove to town, someone might see the dogs. If she did anything that looked like responsibility, it might stick to her like sap. And Madison Pierce did not do sticky problems. Her fingers hovered over the screen anyway. Then, faintly, in the distance, came the sound of footsteps on snow. Madison froze. A man appeared far up the road, moving toward her at a steady pace. Not rushing, not strolling. The gait of someone who had learned how to conserve energy when the world was trying to kill him. He wore a brown coat, old leather, creased at the elbows, over a red and black plaid shirt. His jeans were faded, his boots practical. A beanie covered dark hair dusted with snow. His shoulders were broad, but not the puffed-up broad of a gym mirror. The quiet broad of work and war and carrying things alone. Madison's throat tightened. She glanced at the box, then at the man, then back at the box. The box suddenly looked louder than her SUV. She straightened, as if posture could fix a moral decision. The man got closer. 30 yards. 25. Madison acted. She walked fast back to her SUV, yanked the door open, slid in, and started the engine like she was afraid it would refuse her. The tires spun once, through slush, then caught. She pulled away. In the mirror, the box shrank behind her. The forest swallowed it up. Madison kept driving until the curve in the road erased the scene. Only then did she exhale. "Done," she whispered, and tried to believe it. But winter doesn't care what people whisper. Winter remembers. Jack Turner watched the SUV disappear. He stood still for a long moment, the cold biting through his gloves, his breath drifting in thin clouds. The trees around him were so quiet it felt like the world had paused to listen. He was out checking traps, more habit than hunger. Most days, it wasn't food he was hunting. It was silence. But sometimes silence carried things on it. A faint sound reached him now, so small he almost mistook it for the wind. A whimper. Jack's eyes narrowed. His body shifted into that old trained attention like a switch inside him flipped from man walking in snow to man who has been taught what danger sounds like. He followed the sound. At first he saw nothing but white. Then he saw a cardboard box, half buried, crooked, already collecting snow like a grave. Jack's heart dropped, heavy and sudden. "Jesus," he breathed. He crouched beside the box and pushed the top flap open. 2 puppies stared up at him with wet black eyes and trembling mouths. One squeaked, then tried to crawl toward his hand as if the warmth in his skin was the only truth it recognized. Under them, the mother lay pressed into the cardboard, too weak to sit up. Her eyes locked onto his. Not cute, not grateful, wary. Jack had seen that look before, on the faces of men pulled from wreckage. On his own face in a bathroom mirror, years ago, when he'd come home and realized the person he used to be was still somewhere overseas, buried under sand and noise. The dog's nose twitched. She tried to growl, but it came out as a broken rasp. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "I will try anyway." Jack's throat tightened. "Easy," he said softly. His voice came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again, gentler. "Easy, girl. I'm not here to hurt you." The puppies shivered harder. The mother's eyes flicked to them, then back to him, measuring. Jack took off one glove and offered his bare hand, palm down, still. The cold stung his skin instantly, but he didn't move. The mother inched her nose forward, slow and cautious, and sniffed. Her breath was weak. Her scent was hunger and old fear. She didn't lick him. She didn't relax. But she didn't bite. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "All right," he murmured. "We're doing this." He scanned the road. No other cars, no houses, just the forest and the wide, white emptiness. Whoever dropped them here didn't want witnesses. Jack looked down at the mother's ribs, the slight tremor in her legs, the raw line around her neck where a rope must have been. Something in him, something ancient and stubborn, rose like a fire. Not anger, though it was there. More like a vow. He pulled his coat open, wrapped part of it around the top of the box to block the wind, then carefully slid his arms beneath the cardboard. The mother tensed, but she was too weak to fight him. "Come on," he whispered. "Cabin's not far." He stood, lifting the box close to his chest as if it were fragile glass. One puppy squeaked and pressed into the other. Jack adjusted his grip and began walking back down the road, toward the trees, toward the narrow path that led to his small cabin, hidden like a secret. Snow drifted around him, soft and relentless. And behind him, in the tracks of the SUV, winter began writing its own story, one that Madison Pierce would not be able to drive away from. Jack didn't know that yet. All he knew was the weight of 3 lives against his heart, and how, for the first time in a long time, that weight didn't feel like a burden. It felt like purpose. He glanced down at the mother. Her eyes were still wary, but in them, beneath the fear, something flickered. Not trust, not yet. Just the smallest spark of maybe. Jack tightened his arms around the box. "Hold on," he said, half to her, half to himself. "We're almost home." And the forest, the old silent witness, watched them go, like a god with frost in its beard and a soft spot for stubborn souls. Because some rescues begin with sirens, and some begin with a cardboard box on a winter road. Jack Turner's cabin sat where the forest stopped pretending to be friendly. It was tucked off the road behind a crooked line of pines, half hidden by snowdrifts and the slant of a low hill. An old hunter's place with a tin roof, a stone chimney, and a porch that groaned like an arthritic knee when the wind leaned on it. In summer, it might have looked quaint. In winter, it looked like a stubborn little fortress that refused to die. Jack reached it with the cardboard box pressed tight to his chest, his breath ragged and white. His boots sank into powder and found ice underneath. The cold tried to pry the box from his arms like a thief. Inside the box, one puppy squeaked again, thin, sharp, and offended by the universe. Jack huffed a short laugh. "Yeah, same." He climbed the porch steps, shoulder-checking the door open, and stepped into darkness that smelled like wood, iron, and old smoke. The cabin was cold, but it wasn't empty cold. It had the lingering scent of warmth, like a hearth that remembered what it was built for. He kicked the door shut behind him and set the box gently on the kitchen table. The mother dog stiffened immediately, trying to rise. Her legs shook. She made a sound half growl, half cough. Jack lifted both hands. "I know," he said softly. "You don't know me. You don't have to." The puppies wobbled on their tiny paws, then flopped against each other like drunk little sailors. One tried to climb the edge of the box and failed spectacularly, sliding backward with a muffled squeak. Jack's mouth twitched. He was still breathing hard from the walk, but the cabin suddenly felt different. Not lighter, just less dead. "Okay," he murmured. "First things first." He moved with practiced efficiency. Hands remembering routines the mind didn't need to think about. He'd been a man in chaos once. He'd learned that when life is shaking apart, you don't panic. You do the next right thing. He crossed to the stove, opened the iron door, and stuffed in split logs. His lighter clicked. A flame caught. Then another. In moments, the fire began to chew on the wood, slow at first, then hungry. Heat started to breathe into the room. Jack turned on a lantern, the warm glow spilling across the rough walls and the table. The cabin's interior was simple cast iron stove, scarred wooden floorboards, a small couch with an old quilt thrown over it, shelves lined with tins, tools, and books with cracked spines. A life built for one. Now it had 3 more mouths in it. He filled a pot with water, set it to boil, and rummaged in a cabinet for chicken broth. He didn't have much. He didn't keep much. But he had enough for tonight. Jack glanced back at the table. The mother dog had managed to sit up halfway. Her body trembled with the effort. Her eyes tracked him like a rifle sight. She wasn't barking. She wasn't whining. She was guarding. 2 puppies pressed close to her belly, searching blindly, tiny paws kneading. Their noses nuzzled into her fur, and she lowered her head to touch them with the gentlest bump, like a blessing. Jack's chest tightened. He'd seen mothers like that, women in villages who had nothing but still stood between their children and the world with their bodies. He'd seen fathers like that too, eyes hollow, hands steady. He'd once been the man who made sure the bad things didn't reach them. Then he'd come home and learned bad things could reach you anywhere. Jack shook the thought away and kept moving. He pulled out an old wool blanket, folded it, and laid it on the floor near the stove, not too close to risk sparks, but close enough to catch warmth. Then he grabbed a shallow bowl and poured in some lukewarm water. He approached the table slowly. The mother dog's lips lifted a fraction. Not a snarl, a warning. Jack stopped at a respectful distance and crouched so his eyes were level with hers. His brown coat creaked as he bent. The red and black plaid shirt beneath it looked almost festive in the lantern light, like he'd dressed for a holiday he didn't attend. "Listen," he said quietly. I'm not going to take your babies. I'm going to help you. That's it." The dog didn't blink. Jack set the bowl on the table, closer to her, but not within her immediate reach, then slowly slid it toward her. She watched the bowl like it might explode. One puppy lifted its head, sniffed at the air, and made a tiny squeaking sound that somehow sounded judgmental. Jack exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, I know. The service here is terrible." The puppy sneezed. Jack froze, then let out a short laugh, soft, surprised. It sounded strange in the cabin, like a bird landing somewhere it hadn't landed in a long time. The mother dog's eyes flicked to him. For a brief second, the look on her face, if a dog could have a face like that, seemed almost confused, as if she hadn't expected humor from a stranger. Jack rose carefully and carried the box down to the blanket by the stove. He did it with both hands, slow and steady, like he was moving a wounded soldier. The mother tensed, then, because she had no other choice, let him. As soon as the box touched the blanket, the puppies wriggled toward the warmth, their tiny bodies drawn to it like moths to flame. The mother tried to reposition herself around them, but her strength was thin. Jack swallowed hard. He went to the sink, rinsed his hands, then pulled out a small first aid kit from a drawer. It was the kind he kept for himself, for splinters and cuts and things he didn't want to drive into town for. He brought it over and sat on the floor, a few feet away. "Okay," he whispered. "Let me see you." The mother dog's ears flattened. Her eyes narrowed. Jack didn't reach for her. Not yet. He simply sat there, breathing slow, letting her scent him, letting the room learn him. The fire crackled. Time passed in a thin thread. Finally, the mother lowered her head an inch, exhausted. Jack took that as permission, not trust, but exhaustion surrendering to necessity. He reached out carefully, letting her see every movement, and touched the fur along her shoulder. It was coarse and cold. He felt the sharpness of her bones under it. She flinched but didn't snap. Jack lifted the fur along her neck. The raw line around her throat was worse up close, rubbed, hairless, angry red skin with a few scabbed places where a rope or chain had bitten in. A collar mark, but too rough to be from a normal collar. Jack's jaw clenched. "Someone tied you up," he said quietly. The mother dog's eyes hardened, as if that memory still lived in her muscles. Jack opened the kit and dabbed antiseptic on a piece of gauze. He hesitated, then looked at her again. "I'm going to clean it," he murmured. "It'll sting, but it'll help." He pressed the gauze gently to the wound. The mother dog sucked in a sharp breath through her nose, then tried to lunge. Not to bite him, to put herself between him and the puppies. Her body moved on instinct, even though she barely had strength. The box slid slightly. One puppy tumbled, squeaked loudly, and rolled like a fuzzy potato. Jack pulled his hand back immediately. "Whoa, easy, easy." The puppy squeaked again, somehow more offended than injured. Jack blinked. Then against his will, he smiled. "All right," he said softly. "You've got opinions. I respect that." The mother's eyes stayed on him, fierce and frightened. Her breath came fast. Jack didn't try again. Instead, he stood, walked to the cupboard, and pulled out a clean towel. He tore a strip from it with his hands, then held it up like a peace flag. "No touching," he promised. "Not unless you say so." He laid the strip on the floor between them and scooted the antiseptic bottle closer so she could smell it. Then he backed away. Minutes stretched. The fire warmed the cabin enough that the air no longer hurt to breathe. At last, the mother dog shifted. Slowly, she nudged the strip of towel toward herself, sniffed the antiseptic, and very carefully let her chin lower. It wasn't a surrender. It was a negotiation. Jack nodded once, as if sealing a pact. He inched forward, dabbed again, gentler this time, as if he were handling something sacred. The mother dog trembled. Her eyes stayed open, but she let him do it. Jack worked quietly until the worst of the grime was gone. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The cabin said enough with its heat. When he was done, he sat back. The mother dog exhaled, long and shaky. One puppy had crawled halfway out of the box and was now asleep with its face in the blanket, mouth slightly open as if dreaming of milk. The other puppy had found Jack's boot and was gnawing on the lace with tiny teeth that were more gum than weapon. Jack looked down at it. The puppy paused, looked up, and sneezed directly onto his boot. Jack stared at the wet spot. Then he let out a laugh, quiet, helpless, real. "You've got a real gift," he whispered. "You know that?" The mother dog watched him laugh. Something in her gaze softened, not much, but enough to be noticed, like the smallest crack in a frozen lake. Jack reached into the box and carefully lifted the puppies one by one, placing them on the blanket closer to their mother's belly. The mother's head followed his hands, but she didn't growl. She simply watched, alert. Jack settled back on his heels. "Okay," he said gently. "You need names." He wasn't sure why he said it. Maybe because names made things real. Maybe because he'd spent too long in a world where names got erased. He looked at the mother dog. Her eyes were moon-dark in the lantern glow. Her coat, though dull, still carried the nobility of her breed, the shape of her face, the set of her ears, the stubborn line of her jaw. "Luna," he decided. The word came out without thought. "That's you." The mother dog blinked slowly as if tasting it. Jack turned to the puppies. The one chewing his bootlace looked like it had been born to cause trouble. "You," Jack murmured, "are Milo." The sleeping one, curled in a tight little ball, seemed softer, calmer, like a tiny prayer. "And you," he whispered, "are Daisy." The puppies didn't care. They were busy being alive. But Jack cared, because something in him, something he thought had frozen solid, had started to thaw. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then set it down without calling anyone. Not yet. Tonight wasn't for the world. Tonight was for a cabin, a fire, and 3 souls who had been left to die on a winter road. Outside, the wind pushed snow against the windows like impatient fingers. Inside, Luna lifted her head and finally drank from the bowl. Jack watched her, and the relief that filled his chest felt like a warm hand resting over a scar. He didn't know what trouble had followed her. He didn't know who had dropped her. He didn't know how expensive it would be to do the right thing. But he knew this. Some nights, fate didn't arrive with thunder. It arrived in a cardboard box, and it dared a lonely man to become a home. The cabin warmed slowly, the way an old heart does after years of refusing comfort. By midnight, the iron stove had turned from cold metal to a breathing beast, its belly glowing faintly, its sides ticking as it expanded with heat. The air inside smelled of pine smoke and broth, and beneath that, something newer. Life. Jack Turner sat in the armchair by the window with a mug of black coffee that had gone lukewarm and bitter because he'd forgotten to drink it. His eyes kept drifting to the blanket by the stove. Luna lay there curled around Milo and Daisy like a dark crescent moon, her ribs still too visible, her coat still dull, but her breathing had steadied. The puppies' tiny bodies rose and fell in rhythm, warm and ridiculous and fragile, as if they'd never heard of winter. Jack should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the old soldier's itch, the one that had kept him alive overseas, the one that whispered, "If something feels too quiet, it's because you haven't heard the danger yet." He shifted in his chair and listened, not just to the cabin, to the world outside it. The wind hissed through the pines. Snow slid off the roof in soft, sighing slumps. Somewhere far back in the timber, an owl called once, low and hollow. Then beneath it all came a different sound, a faint crunch, not the random crunch of snow settling, the deliberate crunch of weight. Jack froze. He didn't move his head. He didn't turn. He simply let his breath slow, the way he'd been trained to do when attention mattered more than comfort. Another crunch. Closer this time. Jack's hand drifted toward the side table where he kept an old flashlight and a hunting knife. He didn't grab them yet. He just touched the edge of the table, grounding himself. The sound stopped. Silence returned, thick and waiting. Jack's gaze slid to Luna. She was awake, not fully up, but alert in a way that made her look less like an animal and more like a sentry carved from shadow. Her ears were locked forward. Her eyes were fixed on the door. The puppies slept on, oblivious. Jack swallowed. He didn't trust the silence. Silence could be a liar. He rose slowly from the chair and moved toward the window, careful with every footstep so the floorboards wouldn't squeal. The glass was cold enough to sting his fingertips when he pulled the curtain aside. The forest outside was a dim gray blur. The moon hid behind cloud cover. Snowflakes drifted in slow spirals, as if the air itself had decided to move in whispers. Jack could see the porch, the steps, the yard. Nothing. But the feeling didn't leave. He let the curtain fall back. Maybe it was an animal, a deer nosing through snow, a fox hunting mice beneath the drifts. Or maybe. He looked toward the fireplace. On the mantel, beside an old photograph turned face down, sat a small metal tin. Jack opened it with one hand and pulled out a set of spare batteries and a compact radio. The radio was old, scuffed, and reliable in the way old men were. He turned it on low. Static. A few distant voices. Weather talk. Then a crackle of a local station that sounded like it was broadcasting from inside someone's kitchen. "Front, pushing through overnight," the voice said. "Visibility will drop to near zero in some pockets. Folks should stay off the county roads. Repeat, stay off the county roads." Jack's eyes narrowed. Stay off the roads. Except someone had been on one tonight. Someone rich enough to own a dark SUV that drove like it had no fear of consequences. Jack turned the volume down and set the radio aside. He walked to the kitchen table, where the cardboard box still sat, its flaps bent back. Snow had melted off it, leaving damp rings on the wood. Jack's gaze caught on something near the bottom corner of the box, a faint smear. Dark, not mud, something thicker. He crouched and ran a thumb over it. The smear was old blood. Jack's jaw tightened. He looked at Luna again. She had been lying on that box for who knew how long. He crouched near her, speaking softly so he didn't startle her. "Hey, easy. I'm just looking." Luna's lip lifted slightly, then fell. She didn't have the energy for threats, but she still had pride. Jack moved his hand along her foreleg. Her muscle twitched. The fur there was stiff, clumped. He found the source, a shallow gash along her paw. Not fresh, but not healed-like. She'd stepped on something sharp and kept going because stopping wasn't an option. He exhaled slowly. "Okay," he murmured. "We'll fix you up." When he reached for the first aid kit, Luna shifted her head and gave a low, warning rumble. Jack paused. "I know. You're the boss. I get it." The rumble faded, almost offended that he'd understood so quickly. Jack smiled faintly, then worked gently, rinsing the paw with warm water, wrapping it with gauze. Luna watched him the whole time, not trusting, but also not fighting. When he finished, Jack sat back on his heels. "Who did this to you?" he whispered. Luna didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the door again, and that was when Jack saw it. A thin line of something tangled in her fur near her neck, almost invisible against the dark coat. He leaned in, careful, and pinched it between his fingers. A piece of wire. Not a leash. Not a collar. A thin, stiff wire threaded through the fur like someone had tried to attach something and failed. Jack's stomach sank. He slid his fingers under the fur and found a small lump there, tucked near the collar line where her wound was raw. Jack's body went still. He didn't yank it. He didn't rush. He simply sat, staring at the shape beneath the fur. Luna's breathing quickened. Jack lifted both hands away. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay. I won't. Not right now." Luna's eyes stayed locked on his. Whatever that lump was, it mattered enough that someone might come back for it. Jack stood and went to the coat rack near the door. He took down his brown coat again, slipped it on, and tightened the collar. The red and black plaid beneath it looked like a flag in the lantern light. He pulled on boots, then paused, looking at Luna and the puppies. "I'm just stepping outside," he told her, as if she cared about explanations, as if she wouldn't already know. Luna rose with effort, limping slightly, and moved between him and the puppies. She didn't growl, she didn't bark. She simply positioned herself like a barricade. Jack nodded. "Good girl," he murmured, then corrected himself quieter. "Good mom." He opened the door and stepped out. Cold hit him hard, sharp enough to clear any lingering softness from his mind. The night air smelled clean, too clean, like it wanted to erase everything. Jack closed the door behind him, leaving only a narrow crack of light spilling onto the porch. He crouched and examined the snow. At first, he saw only his own tracks from earlier wide boot prints leading to the cabin. Then he saw something else, a second set of boot prints. Not his. They were newer, edges sharp, not softened by falling snow. Someone had walked up the porch steps. Someone had stood here, right where Jack was crouching now. His throat tightened. Jack followed the prints carefully, keeping his flashlight off. The moonlight was enough. The tracks led away from the porch and into the trees, but halfway into the yard, the prints vanished. Not because the person turned around, because the person had been picked up. Jack looked up sharply, scanning the tree line, the road beyond. A vehicle had come close enough to collect someone without leaving obvious tire tracks in his driveway. That meant they'd stayed on the road. That meant... Jack stood and walked to the road where snow had been packed down by earlier traffic. He found what he was looking for almost immediately. Fresh tire tracks. Wide, heavy tread. Not the delicate pattern of Madison's SUV. These tracks were from something built to carry weight. A truck. Jack stared at the marks as if they were writing. He could almost see it. Headlights off, rolling slow. Someone stepping out, checking the cabin, deciding whether to knock or wait. Then leaving. Not because they were done, because they'd seen something they didn't expect. Jack's chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was recognition. The world Jack had tried to escape, the world of men who moved in shadows and hunted what they wanted, had found him anyway. He turned back toward the cabin and saw a faint glimmer on the snow near the porch step. A small object half buried. Jack bent, brushed snow aside and picked it up. A cigarette butt, still faintly warm. Jack held it between two fingers, his breath turning to smoke in the cold. He didn't smoke. He hadn't allowed cigarettes in his cabin in years. Someone else had been here. Someone else had waited long enough to light one. Someone who didn't care if the smell lingered like a signature. Jack crushed the butt in his gloved hand. Inside the cabin, Luna let out a low, restless sound. Jack looked at the door, then at the road. He suddenly understood something that made his blood run cold. The girl in the SUV hadn't just abandoned a dog. She'd abandoned evidence. Jack stepped back into the cabin and shut the door quietly behind him. Luna stood rigid near the stove, body angled toward him, eyes demanding answers. Jack knelt by her, close enough to speak without raising his voice. "Someone came here tonight," he said. Luna's ears twitched, as if to say, "I know." Jack glanced at the puppies, still sleeping, blissfully ignorant. He lowered his voice even more. "And I think they might come back." Luna's gaze hardened, not with fear, with something older, a promise carved into bone. Jack rose and crossed to the window again, looking out at the dark trees and the road beyond. He'd brought 3 lives into his home thinking the only enemy was winter. Now he knew better. Winter was honest. It told you it was trying to kill you. People smiled, drove away, and left you in a box. Jack turned from the window, his face set. He grabbed his phone from the table and finally opened it. Not to call the world, not yet. First, he needed to understand what he was dealing with. He looked at Luna one more time, and for the first time, she looked back at him not just as a stranger, but as a man standing between her babies and the dark. Outside, the wind rose, pushing snow against the glass like fingers tapping a warning. Inside, the fire crackled louder, and the cabin, once a quiet refuge for a lonely veteran, became something else entirely. A battleground waiting for dawn. Morning didn't arrive like a sunrise. It arrived like a judge. Gray light seeped into the cabin through frosted glass, revealing every scratch in the wood, every dent in the stove, every truth Jack Turner had tried to keep small. Outside, the wind had calmed, but the cold stayed patient and official. Jack stood at the kitchen table with his phone in one hand and a chipped mug in the other. He hadn't slept. Not really. He'd sat through the night listening to silence the way some men listen to confession. Luna lay near the stove, curled around Milo and Daisy. The puppies were awake now, wobbling, sniffing, discovering the world one clumsy inch at a time. Daisy had found a loose thread on the blanket and was treating it like an enemy combatant. Milo had decided Jack's boot was food, faith, and destiny. Jack watched them and felt something inside him soften. Then he remembered the cigarette butt, the second set of tracks, the heavy truck tread on the county road. Softness didn't erase danger, it just made the stakes heavier. He set the mug down and looked at Luna. "All right," he murmured. "We do this the careful way." Luna's ears tipped forward. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Jack was not a man who spoke like that unless the world was about to turn sharp. He crouched slowly beside her, palms open. Luna's eyes followed every movement. Jack didn't touch her neck at first. He touched the blanket near her shoulder, just enough to be present without demanding. He waited until her breathing slowed. Then, with the gentleness of a man diffusing an old bomb, he parted the fur along her collar line. The lump was still there, small, hard, wrong. He felt the thin wire again, threaded through fur like a hook. Jack's jaw clenched. "Okay," he whispered. "I see you." Luna tensed, a low sound vibrating in her chest. Not rage, not fear. A mother's law. Jack stopped and held still. "I'm not taking you from your babies," he said softly. "I'm taking something off you, something that doesn't belong." He reached into the first aid kit and pulled out a pair of small scissors. He held them where Luna could see them. He didn't bring them close yet. The puppies squeaked. Milo rolled onto his back for no reason other than being Milo. Jack almost laughed. Almost. Instead he breathed in, slow, and leaned closer. With one careful snip, he cut the wire. Luna flinched, but she didn't snap. Jack slid 2 fingers under the fur and lifted the object free. It wasn't a collar tag. It wasn't a tracker like the kind hikers used. It was a small plastic module, black, scuffed, sealed about the size of a thick coin, with a faint metal strip and a tiny embossed number. Something made to be hidden, something meant to be found later by the right hands. Jack stared at it. A cold understanding settled in him like snow. "Yeah," he murmured, "that's why you were left." Luna's eyes narrowed, as if she'd been waiting for him to catch up. Jack stood and walked to the stove. He held the module near the heat knot to melt it, just to warm it enough that whatever adhesive held it might soften. Then he wrapped it in a rag and tucked it into an empty coffee tin. He didn't crush it. Not yet. He wanted to know who owned it. He wanted to know who'd come looking for it. Jack picked up his phone again and scrolled through contacts he hadn't used in years, names from the life he'd quit, numbers that felt like doors he'd nailed shut. He stopped on one, Ray Caldwell. Jack hesitated. Then he hit call. It rang twice, 3 times. A man answered with a voice like gravel in morning anger. "Who the hell—" "It's Jack," Jack said. Silence. Then a sharp exhale like the world had just shifted. "Jack Turner?" "Yeah. I thought you fell off the map." "I tried," Jack said. A pause. "You okay?" Jack looked at Luna, at the puppies, at the little family that had dropped into his life like a test. "Depends on your definition." Ray's voice lowered. "Talk to me." Jack didn't give the whole story. He gave the parts that mattered. Abandoned shepherd, 2 pups, strange device, tracks at night, a truck. Ray didn't interrupt. When Jack finished, Ray exhaled again, this time slower. "That device could be a locator," Ray said, "or a marker. People use them for stolen goods. Dogs, sometimes worse." Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "So what do I do?" "First," Ray said, "don't play hero. Second, don't let anyone know you have it. Third, get those dogs somewhere safe." Jack glanced around his cabin. He had always thought it was safe. That was the lie of solitude. You mistake quiet for protection. "I can't just drive them into town," Jack said. "If someone's watching—" "Then you stay put," Ray said. "I'll make a few calls." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You're still a deputy?" Ray laughed once, humorless. "Retired. But retirement's just a word people say when they want the world to stop asking favors." Jack felt a tightness in his throat. "Ray, I don't want trouble." Ray's voice softened. "Jack, trouble already found you. What you want stopped mattering when someone decided a mother dog and her babies were disposable." Jack didn't argue. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, phone in hand, listening to the cabin's small sounds, the fire ticking, the puppies squeaking, Luna's steady breathing. Then he set the phone down and began preparing, like a man who'd learned long ago that fear is useless unless it moves your hands. He moved furniture quietly. He checked locks. He placed a heavy chair under the back door handle. He pulled the curtains tight. He found his old flashlight, replaced the batteries. He checked his rifle, not because he wanted a fight, but because he refused to die surprised. Milo waddled up to his pant leg and latched onto the fabric with tiny teeth. Jack looked down. "I'm flattered," he murmured. "But this isn't a buffet." Milo sneezed in response, as if offended by the concept of boundaries. Even Luna's eyes softened, just a fraction at that. Miles away, Madison Pierce sat in her kitchen where everything shined. Her counters were white marble. Her coffee machine had a screen. Her windows were tall and clean, framing a view of a world that belonged to her family. But Madison's hands trembled around her mug, not from cold, from memory. The cardboard box had felt heavier than it should have, not because of the puppies, because of what it represented. A decision you couldn't unmake. She stared at her phone. There were missed calls she hadn't answered, texts she hadn't opened. She opened one. "You did it?" Another followed. "Tell me you did it." Then the third. "Don't get cute, Madison. We know where you live." Madison's stomach dropped. She told herself she wasn't like this. She told herself she'd only agreed because she was scared, because they'd made it sound simple. Just drop the dog. Just get rid of it. She hadn't asked why. That was the sin of rich people sometimes, believing ignorance was a kind of innocence. Her phone rang again. She answered on the third ring, voice sharp to hide the panic. "What?" A man's voice slid through the line, calm, amused, and cruel. "Madison, I did what you said," she snapped. "It's done." "You're sure?" he asked, like he was asking about a dinner reservation. Madison swallowed. "Yes," a soft chuckle. "Then why did my guy see a light on in a cabin near mile marker 17 last night?" Madison's blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do," the voice said. "Listen carefully. That dog isn't a dog. It's a pocket. And what's in that pocket belongs to us." Madison's mouth went dry. "I didn't take anything." "You didn't have to," the man said, still calm. "You just had to throw it where we could pick it up without anyone asking questions." Madison's eyes flicked to the window. The morning sun was bright, but she felt like she was underwater. "Here's what's going to happen," the man continued. "You're going to drive back. You're going to find the dog. And you're going to make sure it ends up where it was supposed to." Madison's voice cracked. "It was freezing. There were puppies." "Not our problem," the man said, and in that moment she understood something. He meant it. He truly meant it. Life to him was just debris around the thing he wanted. Madison pressed her palm to her forehead, fighting the nausea. "I can't." Silence. Then the voice hardened. "Yes, you can." The line clicked dead. Madison stared at her phone, breath shallow. Her gaze drifted to the driveway where her SUV sat clean and dark and obedient. She thought of the mother dog's eyes. Not cute, not begging, enduring. Madison's throat tightened, and for the first time the warmth of her house felt like a lie. She stood slowly, as if gravity had changed. Outside, her world was bright and polished. Inside, something cracked, because winter had a way of dragging truths to the surface. And somewhere in the forest, a veteran in a brown coat and a red and black plaid shirt had just become the obstacle between her mistake and the men who never made mistakes twice. Madison grabbed her keys, not because she wanted to obey, because she didn't know yet how to be brave. But the road was already calling her name. The storm came back like an old enemy who'd been told to leave and laughed on the way out. By late afternoon, the sky darkened to the color of steel. Snow began to fall again, fat flakes at first, almost gentle, then sharper, driven sideways by a wind that sounded like it had teeth. The trees swayed and creaked in complaint. The cabin's windows turned milky with frost, as if the forest was trying to erase the view and the truth with it. Inside, the cabin glowed with firelight. Jack Turner moved like a man building a small kingdom out of whatever he could reach. He checked the latches on the windows. He slid a heavy chair under the back door handle. He placed a cast-iron pan near the stove knot for cooking, but because cast iron was the kind of honesty you could hold in your hand. His brown coat hung over a chair near the table. The red and black plaid shirt beneath it was rolled at the sleeves, a flash of color in a world that had become only gray and white. Luna watched him from her blanket by the stove. She hadn't slept much since the night before. Her eyes tracked the cabin the way a wolf tracked the edge of a fire. She kept her body curved protectively around Milo and Daisy, though the puppies were already growing bolder, two tiny fools who believed the world was a chew toy. Milo had discovered the joy of attacking Jack's boot again, and Daisy had declared war on the hem of the blanket. Every few minutes she'd yank it like she was pulling a dragon's tail, then fall over and look offended at gravity. Jack glanced down at her and murmured, "Careful, Daisy. The blanket might fight back." Daisy sneezed. It was the kind of sneeze that sounded like a mouse giving a sermon. Jack felt a laugh rise in his chest's small, stubborn warmth. Then the radio crackled. He turned it up just enough to hear Ray Caldwell's voice through the static. Ray wasn't broadcasting. He was calling back on a line that sounded strained and far away. "Jack," Ray said, voice low. "You there?" "I'm here. You still got the dogs?" Jack looked at Luna. She held his gaze like a challenge. "Yeah." "Good. Listen, county's getting hit hard. Roads are already icing. I talked to someone I trust in town. There's been chatter." Jack's jaw tightened. "What kind of chatter?" "About a missing package." Ray hesitated, like he hated the words. "And the word is they think it ended up with a dog." Jack glanced toward the coffee tin by the stove where he'd hidden the module. It suddenly felt heavier than metal. Ray continued, "They've got somebody local scouting. If they come to your cabin, they'll act friendly first." "Friendly men don't come in storms," Jack said. Ray gave a humorless chuckle. "Exactly. Here's what you do. Don't open the door. Don't tell them anything. Keep lights low. If you can leave, leave." Jack's eyes flicked to the window. The storm was a wall, a white curtain thrown by a god with a cruel sense of timing. "I can't drive out in that," Jack said. "You might not have to," Ray replied. "I'm trying to get a unit out your way, but conditions are bad. If they can't make it—" The radio hissed with static. "Ray? Then you hold tight." Ray's voice pushed through again. "You hear me? Hold tight. You're not alone in this, Jack. Not anymore." Jack swallowed. He didn't like needing help. He'd spent years believing solitude was the same as safety. "Yeah," he said. "I hear you." The line popped. Static returned. Jack set the radio down and stood still for a long moment, listening to the storm batter the roof. He could feel the cabin's timbers vibrate, like bones shivering under skin. Luna lifted her head. Her ears snapped forward. Jack didn't move. Then he heard it too. A vehicle. Not close yet, but there, under the wind's howl, a faint engine note climbing, pushing through snow like a stubborn beast. Headlights swept briefly across the trees, then vanished behind the hill. Jack's heart slowed to a cold, steady rhythm. He didn't panic. He did what he always did when the world narrowed to one dangerous moment. He prepared. He crossed to the lantern and turned it down. The cabin's light softened, more ember than glow. He moved to the fireplace and nudged the curtain a half-inch, just enough to see outside without advertising he was watching. The headlights appeared again, brighter now, cutting through the snow. A truck large, heavy rolled to a stop near the road. Its engine idled. 2 doors opened. 2 men stepped out. They wore dark jackets and winter caps pulled low. One was taller, broad-shouldered. The other moved with a kind of loose confidence, like he'd never been told no in his life. Their boots crunched into the snow and left sharp prints. The taller man held a flashlight but kept it pointed down. Polite predators. Jack's fingers tightened around the edge of the curtain. He forced himself to breathe slowly. The men walked toward the cabin. Inside, Milo sensed the shift in Luna's body and began to whimper. Daisy joined in, a tiny chorus of alarm. Luna stood, limping slightly, placing herself between the puppies and the door. Her low growl rolled through the cabin, not loud, but deep enough to make the air feel heavier. Jack crouched beside her and whispered, "Good. Stay with them." He stood and backed toward the bedroom doorway, the place he'd cleared earlier, the spot with the strongest line of sight to the front door, the place where he could guard without being seen. The knock came. Not a friendly neighbor knock, not an emergency knock, a controlled, measured knock. 3 taps, the kind that said, "We know you're in there." A voice followed, smooth, practiced, too loud to be accidental. "Hello? Anyone home?" Jack didn't answer. Another knock, louder this time. "Sir," the voice called, "we're looking for a dog, German Shepherd. She might have wandered up this way. We're worried about her." Jack's eyes narrowed. Worried. "Sure." Luna's growl deepened. The voice softened, as if kindness could unlock a door. "We saw tracks. Looks like you brought her in. If you did, we'd like to take her back. We'll pay you for the trouble." Jack's mouth tightened. Pay you. That's what men offered when they didn't want questions. He stayed silent. A pause. Then the second man spoke, his voice lower, less charming. "Open the door, buddy. Weather's bad. We don't want to stand out here all night." Jack's gaze flicked to the chair braced under the back door, the locked windows, the phone on the table. He could call 911, but out here, response time wasn't measured in minutes. It was measured in prayers. Another knock hard enough to rattle the door frame. Jack spoke then, voice calm and flat, carrying just enough to be heard. "No dog here." The silence outside tightened like a rope. Then the nice voice returned, still polite but sharpened at the edges. "Sir, we're not looking for trouble, we just need what's ours." Jack's stomach turned cold. He hadn't said anything about a module, about a package, yet the man spoke as if the cabin itself owed them. Jack didn't answer. He heard the men shift on the porch, a faint scrape like someone testing the door handle. The chair held. Luna barked once, sharp and thunderous in the small cabin. Milo yipped in sympathy, as if volunteering for battle with a body the size of a loaf of bread. Jack almost smiled, almost. Outside, the taller man muttered, "He's in there." The other man chuckled softly. "Of course he is." Then the nice voice called again, friendly as poison. "All right, here's the deal. We'll make it simple. You open the door, you hand the dog over, and we all go home warm." Jack's voice came out quiet. "She's not going." Another pause. Then the friendliness slipped like a mask falling. "Then you're making a choice," the man said, "and choices have consequences." Jack felt something old rise in him. Anger, yes, but also clarity. A soldier's clarity. He looked at Luna, standing rigid, eyes burning. She wasn't property. She wasn't a dog. She was a mother who had been thrown away and still tried to stand. Jack took his brown coat from the chair and slipped it on. The leather creaked softly. He buttoned it once, then twice. The red and black plaid at his throat looked like a warning. He moved toward the stove and grabbed the coffee tin with the hidden module. He didn't open it. He just held it for a moment, weighing it. Then he set it down again, farther back, out of sight. Not theirs. Not anymore. A sudden thud hit the sidewall, like someone had shoved the cabin. Snow fell from the roof in a soft cascade. Milo squealed. Daisy, apparently offended by the concept of fear, waddled forward and barked, except her bark came out as a squeaky hiccup. Even Luna blinked, briefly confused. And Jack, against the pressure of the moment, let out one short laugh, low and breathy. "Good," he whispered to Daisy. "Tell 'em." Outside, the men moved off the porch. Jack heard footsteps crunching around the cabin, circling like wolves deciding where to bite first. Jack's eyes tracked the sound. He moved to the window on the side and peered through a sliver of curtain. One man was heading toward the back. The other stayed near the front, scanning. They were splitting up. Jack's mind clicked through options like old gears turning. Hold, hide, wait for Ray, protect Luna and the pups. Then, through the swirling snow, another set of headlights appeared on the road. A smaller vehicle this time. An SUV. It slowed near the truck. Jack's breath caught. The driver door opened. A woman stepped out, hair pale against the storm. Madison Pierce. Even from a distance, Jack could tell she was trembling. Whether from cold or conscience, he couldn't yet say. She walked toward the men, shoulders hunched, arms tight around herself. The nice man met her halfway. Jack couldn't hear the words, but he saw the man's hand lift too close to her face, too controlling. Madison flinched back. Then she looked up toward the cabin. For a second her gaze seemed to land on the windows like she could feel eyes behind them. Jack's jaw tightened. The storm roared, louder, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Inside, Luna stood guard over her puppies. Outside, Madison stood between monsters and a mistake she could no longer outrun. And Jack Turner understood, with a grim kind of certainty, tonight wasn't just about a dog. It was about who chose to be human when winter gave them every excuse not to be. The storm thickened until the world became a shaking lantern light trapped inside snow, sound muffled, time confused. On the road, Madison Pierce stood with her arms wrapped around herself, a pale figure in a dark winter that did not care about wealth. Her SUV's headlights painted long blades across the drifts. The truck's engine idled like a hungry animal kept on a short leash. The nice man Cal Harlan, though Madison had never dared to say his last name out loud, leaned in close enough that his breath could have been a leash too. "You're going to make this easy," Cal said, calm as a priest at a wedding. "You're going to knock. He opens. You smile. You point. We take what we came for." Madison's lips were blue. "I told you. I left the box. I didn't—" Cal's smile didn't change, but his eyes did. They sharpened, like ice forming on a pond. "Don't argue with me in the snow, Madison. It makes you look less expensive." The taller man, Eli, shifted his weight near the truck, scanning the cabin as if it were a bank, and he already knew where the safe was. Madison's gaze flicked to the cabin windows dim, curtained, almost gentle in the storm's violence. Something inside her tightened, not with fear this time, but with a sick understanding. Somebody lived there. Somebody had brought them inside to warmth, and now she was standing here like a doorman for wolves. Cal nudged her forward, just slightly. "Go on." Madison took one step toward the porch. Inside, Jack Turner watched through a narrow slit in the curtain, his breath slow, his mind cleaner than it had been in months. He wore his brown coat, the red and black plaid at his throat, like a warning banner. In the dim cabin light, he didn't look like a man seeking trouble. He looked like a man who had learned to hold it at the door. Luna stood over Milo and Daisy, still limping but steady enough to be a wall. Her eyes tracked Jack, then the door again, like she was counting heartbeats. Jack crouched beside her and murmured, "Stay with them. no matter what. Luna's ears pinned forward. She didn't need permission to be brave. The knock came soft this time, careful. A woman's voice followed, shaky but controlled. "Hello?" Jack didn't answer. The voice tried again, louder. "Sir? I'm sorry to bother you. I think you might have found a dog? A German Shepherd?" Jack's jaw tightened. He could hear the practiced shape of the sentence, but also the tremble underneath it. The tremble sounded real. Luna gave a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Jack moved closer to the door, but he didn't touch the latch. He spoke through the wood, voice even. "You should go back to your car. Storm's getting worse." Silence. Then Madison's voice again, softer, like she was ashamed of how loud her own name had become in her head. "Please, I need to talk to you." Jack stared at the door as if it were a decision carved into timber. Outside, Cal called, friendly, theatrical. "Sir, we're with her. We just want to get that dog back where she belongs." Jack's eyes narrowed. Belongs. That word was always used by men who believed they could own the living. Jack didn't answer. Cal's friendliness thinned. "Come on now. It's freezing. Let's handle this like grown-ups." Eli's boots crunched away from the porch, circling again. Jack could hear him moving along the side wall, looking for a weak spot, testing the cabin's edges like a thief tests windows. Jack's mind measured distance, sound, angles. Then an unexpected sound, a tiny bark. Daisy waddled forward and barked again, but it came out as a squeaky hiccup, as if her courage had to squeeze through a body that was still mostly puppy. For half a heartbeat, even Luna blinked, surprised at the audacity. Jack's mouth twitched, despite everything. "Good," he whispered, barely audible. "Tell him, Daisy." Daisy sneezed, as if agreeing with herself. Outside, Cal laughed. "Hear that? Dog's right there. Open up." Jack's amusement vanished. He moved to the side window, peering through the frost. Eli was near the back now, crouched low, hand moving along the window frame like he was searching for a latch. Jack didn't want to fight, but he also wasn't going to watch a mother dog and her babies get taken back into a world that treated them like a hiding place. He took his phone from the table, thumbed the screen, and quietly tapped Ray's number again. No signal. He tried once more. Nothing. The storm had eaten the line. Of course it had. Jack exhaled slowly and looked at the coffee tin by the stove, the tin that held the black module, the thing that had turned Luna into prey. He didn't want to hand it over, but he also didn't want blood on his cabin floor. Then he remembered something Ray had said. Don't play hero. Hold tight. Holding tight didn't always mean holding still. Jack crossed to the stove, lifted the tin, and carried it to the far end of the cabin, near the back door. He tucked it into a cloth bag and slid it behind a loose board he'd noticed years ago, a harmless flaw in old carpentry. He wasn't hiding it forever. He was hiding it from the wrong hands for the next hour. Then he returned to Luna, knelt, and met her gaze. "You keep them safe," he whispered. "Whatever happens." Luna's nostrils flared. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the weight behind them. Jack took the cast-iron pan from near the stove heavy, honest, and walked quietly toward the back of the cabin where a narrow hallway led to the rear door. Outside, Eli's shape passed the back window, a dark smear in blowing snow. Jack waited. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He let the storm cover his breathing, let the cabin become still. Then the back door handle moved, a slow test, a gentle jiggle. Eli was trying to be polite to the lock. Jack stepped forward and planted the cast-iron pan against the door in a way that would make any sudden shove hurt. The handle jiggled again, harder. Jack's voice came out low and cold. "Don't." The handle froze. Silence. Then Eli's voice, amused, close to the wood. "Oh, you're awake." Jack didn't answer. A sudden slam hit the back door, Eli throwing his shoulder into it. The chair under the front door didn't matter here. Jack had braced the back with a deadbolt and a thick beam. The door shuddered, but it held. Inside the cabin, Milo began to whimper. Luna's growl rolled into something deeper, darker, and Jack felt it in his bones. Luna wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. Jack stepped back, measuring. Another slam. The door rattled again. Jack turned his head toward the living room and saw Madison through the front window slit. She had moved closer to the porch, but now her posture had changed. Her shoulders weren't squared with obedience, they were squared with panic. Cal's hand was on her arm. Madison jerked away. Cal's smile disappeared. Even through the storm, Jack could see Cal's mouth form a sharp command. Madison shook her head. Then, like a switch flipping, Madison ran, not away from the cabin, toward her SUV. Cal lunged after her, shouting something that vanished into the wind. Jack's heart pounded once, heavy. Madison yanked open her driver door, fumbled inside, and Jack saw it clearly, held up her phone, angling it toward the cabin as if trying to catch signal. Her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Cal reached her, grabbed her wrist. Madison screamed, not loud, but desperate, the kind of sound that doesn't belong to a rich girl's curated life. Jack's body moved before his mind finished thinking. He crossed to the front door and threw the bolt halfway, cracking the door just enough to be heard, but not enough to be rushed. "Let her go," Jack called. Cal spun toward the door, eyes bright with irritation. "There you are." Jack kept the door chained. The cold sliced in through the crack. "You're done. Storm's bad. Roads are watched. Walk away." Cal laughed, sharp, ugly. "Watched by who? By you and your family pets?" From behind Jack, Luna barked once deep, commanding. Cal's eyes flicked past Jack into the cabin's glow. For a second, his expression shifted, not fear exactly, but calculation. He could sense the dog's size, the man's steadiness, the cabin's refusal. Eli's slams at the back door stopped. Footsteps crunched around the cabin again, fast now, annoyed. Madison's wrist was still trapped in Cal's grip. Her eyes met Jack's through the snow. And in that look, the spoiled girl cracked open enough for a human being to appear. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. Jack didn't answer with words. He answered by opening the door another inch, still chained, making it clear he was not hiding, making it clear he was not afraid. Cal's smile returned, thin as a blade. "You know what I like about men like you," he said. "You think standing in a doorway makes you a wall." Jack's voice stayed steady. "It does. For the people behind it." Cal stared at him for a long moment, then released Madison's wrist with a shove that sent her stumbling back against the SUV. Cal raised his voice toward the storm, toward the cabin, toward whatever gods still listened. "Last chance, Turner. Hand over the dog, hand over what she's carrying. We leave." Jack's eyes narrowed. "She's carrying puppies." Cal's laughter was short. "Not what I meant." Jack's grip tightened on the chain. Behind him, Luna stood like a dark statue, Milo and Daisy pressed against her belly. Daisy, absurd little warrior, barked again, the squeak bark that sounded like a toy trying to be a lion. For the first time that night, Jack saw Cal's patience fracture. Cal took one step toward the porch, and from the road, faint at first, then clearer, came a new sound. A siren. Not close. Not yet. But real. Madison's head snapped toward it, hope flashing like a match in wind. Cal's eyes hardened. Eli reappeared from the side of the cabin, breath steaming, anger on his face. He looked at Cal, then at the road, then back at the cabin, calculating how much time they had left before the world arrived. Jack felt the siren, too, vibrating through the snow like a prophecy. The storm kept screaming, but now it screamed with company. And in that moment, Jack understood. The battle wasn't won. But it had changed, because somewhere out there, help was forcing its way through winter. And inside the cabin, a mother dog stood guard, not as property, not as prey, but as a law of nature that even cruel men could not fully silence. The siren didn't sound like rescue at first. It sounded like a rumor thin and far away, swallowed by wind, the kind of sound a desperate mind invents to survive another minute. But Jack Turner knew the difference between imagination and machinery. That was real. Outside, Cal Harlan's posture changed the moment he heard it. His shoulders tightened. His head turned slightly toward the road, as if his ears could measure distance and decide whether to run or fight. Eli did the same, only his expression wasn't worried. It was annoyed. Men like that didn't fear the law. They feared inconvenience. Madison Pierce stood by her SUV, one hand pressed to her wrist where Cal had grabbed her. Her breath came in short bursts, white and frantic. She stared toward the sound like a drowning woman staring at a rope. Jack kept the front door chained. Cold cut into the cabin through the crack, turning the room's warmth into something precious and temporary. Behind him, Luna stood rigid over Milo and Daisy. The puppies were awake now, squeaking and wriggling, feeding off Luna's tension like sparks catching dry grass. Daisy barked again, tiny and squeaky, and immediately sneezed as if her courage had hit her own nose on the way out. Jack almost smiled. Almost. Cal stepped closer to the porch, raising his voice over the storm. "You hear that, Turner? That's the county. And you know what happens when they show up?" Jack stared at him through the crack. "They do their job." Cal's grin sharpened. "No. They ask questions. They poke around. And you know what questions lead to?" Jack didn't answer. Cal lifted his chin toward the cabin. "They lead to the thing you're hiding. They lead to paperwork. They lead to your little cabin getting searched top to bottom. And then someone finds what belongs to us anyway." Jack's jaw clenched. Cal wasn't bluffing about the search part. If the county rolled up and saw a standoff, they'd search the property. That was how it worked. Not because they were bad men, because procedure didn't care about nuance. And the module was the kind of object that could turn this cabin into a crime scene. Jack's mind moved fast. Hide it better? Too late. Hand it over? Never. Get it out? Maybe. The siren grew louder, still distant but approaching. The storm did its best to smear it, but it couldn't erase it. Cal's voice lowered. Last chance. Eli moved in closer, boots crunching hard, his gaze drifting to the door chain like he was mentally measuring how much force it would take to snap it. Jack felt the old battlefield calm settle in him, cold, clear, merciful. He'd lived inside moments like this. The world narrowed. Choices became sharp. He looked past Cal and Eli toward Madison. She was trembling, but she wasn't running now. She stood her ground beside the SUV, eyes wet, chin lifted like she was trying to grow a spine in real time. Jack spoke quietly, but his words carried. Madison. Madison's head snapped toward him. "You want to fix what you started?" Jack asked. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Fear wrestled with shame on her face. Cal turned sharply. "Don't talk to her." Jack ignored him. "You want to fix it? Tell them the truth. When law shows up, you say who told you to dump the dogs. You say why." Madison swallowed. I don't know if—" Cal's hand lifted, not to touch her this time, but to warn. "Madison, shut up." Madison flinched. Jack's voice hardened. "You do know." Madison's eyes squeezed shut, then opened again like she'd just stepped out of warm water into ice. "Yes," she said, the word breaking loose. "Yes, I know." Cal's expression changed. He wasn't smiling now. He was deciding, and that was when Jack understood. Cal wasn't going to wait for the siren to arrive. He was going to end this before the world could see it. Eli moved suddenly fast, brutal. He charged the porch, slamming his shoulder into the door. The chain held, but the door frame shuddered. Milo yelped inside the cabin. Luna barked deep, thunderous, her voice filling the small room like a warning bell. Jack stepped back instantly, bracing his shoulder against the door, one hand gripping the chain, the other gripping the cast-iron pan like a primitive shield. Eli hit the door again, harder. Wood groaned. Jack's teeth clenched. "Eli," Cal snapped. "Not yet." Eli didn't listen. He was the kind of man who heard orders as suggestions. Jack breathed once, slow. He'd reinforced the front as best he could, but the cabin was old. Repetition broke everything eventually. He had to change the game. Jack turned his head toward Luna. Back room. Now. Luna didn't want to move. She stood over her puppies like a statue that would rather break than bend. But Jack's voice wasn't asking. It was commanding, the same tone used in fire and chaos. Luna nudged Milo and Daisy with her nose, pushing them backward toward the hallway. The puppies tumbled and squeaked, confused, but they followed her warmth. Jack's heart tightened at the sight of her doing it, still limping, still exhausted, but moving anyway. Outside, Eli slammed the door again. The chain rattled violently. Jack's eyes flicked to the side window, where the curtain trembled with the impact. He could see Cal now, pacing near the porch steps, glancing toward the road where the siren grew louder. Cal was torn between rage and caution. That hesitation was Jack's only advantage. Jack backed away from the door and moved fast to the kitchen. He grabbed the cloth bag he'd hidden earlier and yanked up the loose board near the back hallway. His fingers found the module through the cloth, small and cold, like a curse. He didn't hesitate. He shoved the module deeper into the bag, tied it tight, and slipped it inside his brown coat's inner pocket. Then he crossed to the back door. The cabin had a rear exit that led into trees thicker than the front approach, the kind of cover a hunter relied on when the world went loud. Jack unbolted the back door quietly, opened it a crack, and looked out. Snow churned in the wind. Visibility was a handful of yards. The forest beyond was a blur of black trunks and white air. Perfect. Jack moved back to the hallway where Luna had herded the puppies. He crouched beside her. Luna's eyes were fierce, questioning. Jack spoke low. "We're leaving." Luna's ears flattened. Her gaze flicked toward the front door where Eli kept pounding, then back to the puppies, then to Jack. Jack swallowed. "I know. But if that door breaks—" A crack sounded from the front wood splintering. Luna flinched. Jack didn't wait. He scooped Milo and Daisy quickly, one under each arm like squirming loaves, and nodded for Luna to follow. Luna hesitated only a second, then limped after him, her body tense, her head turning back as if she could hold the cabin with her eyes. Jack opened the back door and stepped out into the storm. Cold hit him like a fist. The wind tore at his coat. Snow stung his face. Milo squeaked in protest. Daisy wiggled, then sneezed into his collar. Jack grunted. "Yeah, I agree." He moved into the trees, boots sinking, pushing through drifts, forcing his body into motion while his mind mapped a route north toward the creek line, then cut east behind the hill, then circled back toward the road where help was coming. Behind him, the cabin's front door finally gave a little another crack, another groan. Eli would be inside soon. Jack didn't look back. He kept moving. Luna followed close, limping but determined, her breath steaming in short bursts. Every few yards she stopped, sniffed, then moved again, as if her instincts were building a new map faster than Jack's memory. And through the storm, through the roaring white, Jack heard the siren grow louder, closer, real. Somewhere behind him, a shout broke through the wind cow's voice, angry, sharp. "He's running!" Another voice answered, Eli's, distant. "Find him!" Jack's muscles tightened. He forced himself onward. The trees thickened. The snow deepened. He could feel the puppies' bodies trembling against him, warm and fragile. Then Luna suddenly stopped and growled low. Jack froze. Ahead, through the white, a figure moved between the trees. Not a wolf, not a deer, a man. Eli had cut around. Jack's pulse spiked. The figure lifted something flashlight beam slicing through snow. The light caught Jack's coat, his face, the puppies. Jack's body reacted before thought. He ducked behind a thick pine, pulling the puppies close, holding his breath. The flashlight beam swept past, searching. Luna pressed beside Jack, her body rigid, her breath controlled. For all her weakness, she moved like an animal born for this, silent, watchful, patient. The beam hovered. Jack could hear Eli's breathing now, close, too close. Jack's fingers tightened around the cast-iron pan he'd brought out without thinking, ridiculous and heavy in his hand like some ancient weapon from a kitchen war. And then, from the road, the siren abruptly blared louder, closer, commanding. Eli's flashlight beam jerked away. He cursed under his breath. He was torn stay and hunt, or run before the law arrived. The siren answered for him. Eli turned and moved back toward the cabin, fast, boots crunching hard. Jack stayed still until the sound faded. Then he exhaled slowly, lungs burning. He looked down at Milo and Daisy. Their eyes were wide, black and shining. Daisy sneezed again, as if even fear was allergic. Jack whispered, "We're okay. We're okay." Luna didn't relax, but she nudged Jack's leg once quick, firm. "Move." Jack nodded. They pushed forward through the trees, angling toward the road where the siren was now joined by another sound. Engines. Multiple. The county was coming. And in the storm's blinding white, Jack Turner carried 2 tiny lives under his arms, a mother dog limping at his side, and a cursed little module against his chest. Not as a hero chasing glory. As a man simply refusing to let the world throw a family away twice. The storm began to break the way grief sometimes does. Not all at once, not with a sudden sunny apology, but in thin, reluctant cracks, wind easing for a moment, snow falling less sideways, the forest finally exhaling as if it had been holding its breath for days. Jack Turner emerged from the trees near the county road like a man being born out of white fire. His boots punched through drifts, his lungs burned. Milo and Daisy were tucked tight under his arms, wrapped partly in his brown coat. Their little bodies trembled, not from cold alone, but from the fear that had soaked into them like rain. Luna limped at his side, her breath steaming, her eyes fierce and exhausted. She looked like she'd been carved out of the storm itself, part wolf, part mother, part miracle that refused to lie down. Ahead, through the thinning veil of snow, headlights swung across the road. Then, red and blue lights. Then the long, blunt shape of a sheriff's SUV and a second unit behind it, tires grinding slowly, cautiously, as if the vehicles knew one mistake could slide them into a ditch. A siren whooped once sharp, official, then cut off. The night fell quiet enough for Jack to hear his own heartbeat. A deputy stepped out first, hand near his holster but not drawn, shoulders hunched against the cold. Another followed, shining a flashlight in a wide arc. "Sheriff's office," the deputy called. "Identify yourself." Jack raised his free hand, careful, and stepped forward into the beam. "Jack Turner," he shouted back. "I'm the one who called. Well, I tried. Storm-killed signal." The deputies stiffened. One recognized the name, or at least the tone, because men in real trouble don't sound theatrical. "Turner?" another voice called, and then a third figure appeared from the second vehicle, broad-shouldered, gray-bearded, moving with a limp that looked familiar. Ray Caldwell. Ray's eyes locked onto Jack. Relief flashed across his face, then hardened into focus as he took in the puppies and Luna. "Son of a gun," Ray muttered, voice catching. "You weren't kidding." Jack exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a lifetime. "No." Ray moved closer, hands up in a calming gesture, more for Luna than for Jack. "Easy, girl. Easy." Luna didn't lunge. She didn't bark. She stood between Jack and the deputies, body tense, eyes bright with the same question she'd asked all along. "Are these people safe?" Milo squeaked. Daisy, apparently offended by the formality of law enforcement, wriggled and sneezed directly into Jack's collar. Ray blinked, then snorted a laugh. "That one's got personality." Jack let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh too. "Yeah, she's brave." Ray nodded toward the tree line. "Where are they?" Jack's gaze flicked back toward the cabin's direction. "2 men. One called Cal. One big guy. They tried to force entry." The deputy closest to Ray spoke into his radio. "Possible suspects on foot near Turner cabin. Proceed with caution." Ray's jaw tightened. You got hurt? Jack shook his head. Not me. He reached into his coat and pulled out the cloth bag with the black module inside. He held it up like a bad coin. This is why, he said. Ray's eyes narrowed. The deputy leaned in, flashlight catching the edges of the object through the cloth. Ray's voice dropped. Where'd you get that? On the dog, Jack answered. Tied into her fur. Someone wanted it back. Ray took the bag carefully, like it might bite. All right, he said softly. That's evidence, and it's enough to make tonight a lot more interesting. Jack's gaze flicked toward the road again. A set of headlights approached fast, too fast for the conditions. An SUV skidded slightly, corrected, then stopped near the deputy's vehicles. The driver's door flew open. Madison Pierce stumbled out into the snow, hair blown wild, coat half-zipped, her face pale as moonlight. She looked less like a rich girl now, and more like a person who'd finally realized money couldn't buy silence. "Wait!" she shouted. "Please, wait!" The deputies turned, hands tightening, suspicion rising. Ray stepped forward. "Ma'am, stay where you are." Madison stopped, trembling. Her eyes found Jack, and there it was again, shame, fear, and something new, resolve. "I'm the one," Madison said, voice breaking. "I'm the one who left the dogs. I didn't know what I was doing." Ray's eyes narrowed. "Then you came back with those men." Madison swallowed hard. "Yes, they made me, but I'm not doing it anymore." Jack watched her, face unreadable. Madison took a step closer, hands raised like she was surrendering to something bigger than law. "Their names Cal Harlan and Eli Stroud. Cal told me the dog was holding something. I thought it was just a collar or paperwork or—" Her voice cracked. "He threatened me. He said they knew where I lived." Ray's gaze flicked to the deputies. "Get her in the car. Warm her up. Take a statement." One deputy guided Madison toward the sheriff's SUV. She looked back at Jack as she walked, eyes wet. "I'm sorry," she mouthed again. Jack didn't nod. He didn't forgive her with a smile. He simply looked at Luna. And Luna, who had been betrayed by a human hand and still stood, watched Madison with eyes that did not soften. Not yet. Some debts were paid slowly. The deputies moved out toward the cabin in 2 units, tires grinding through snow. Ray stayed behind with Jack, making sure he didn't collapse now that his body finally had permission. Ray's breath steamed as he spoke quietly. "You did good. You know that?" Jack's laugh came out dry. "I didn't do anything heroic. I just didn't open the door." Ray's eyes warmed. "That's heroic enough these days." Jack looked down at the puppies. Milo had finally fallen asleep, warm and limp, as if courage required naps. Daisy stared up at Jack with wide eyes, then sneezed again, tiny and defiant. Ray chuckled. "She's going to be trouble." Jack's mouth twitched. "Good." Luna stood rigid for another minute, then her legs trembled. Exhaustion hit her like a wave. Jack crouched beside her, supporting her chest gently. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're not alone now." Luna's eyes stayed open, fierce even in fatigue. But her head lowered a fraction, just enough to admit her body was done. Ray leaned closer. "We'll get a vet out. I promise." Jack nodded once. Then from the direction of the cabin, a burst of radio chatter crackled through the deputy's handheld. Ray's face tightened as he listened. "Copy. Keep me updated." Jack stood, watching the storm's edge soften. "Did they catch them?" "Not yet," Ray said. "But they're in a storm too, and the storm doesn't pick sides." Jack stared out at the white road, at the trees that had hidden danger and then hidden escape. He felt something settle inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace, purpose. Because whether Cal and Eli were caught tonight or tomorrow, the truth had surfaced. Madison had spoken. Evidence was in the sheriff's hands. The wolves had been forced into daylight. Ray clapped a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Come on. Let's get you and the family somewhere warm." Jack looked down at Luna, then at Milo and Daisy. Family. The word landed in him like a weight and a blessing. 2 days later, the storm was gone. The world outside the cabin glittered with fresh snow under a clean, honest sky. The county had plowed the road. The forest looked almost gentle, as if it hadn't tried to swallow everything. Inside the cabin, warmth returned, not just from the stove, but from the feeling that something had changed. Luna lay on a new blanket near the fire, her paw bandaged properly now, her neck wound cleaned and healing. Her ribs were still visible, but her eyes had steadied. She ate slowly from a bowl of soft food, pausing now and then to check on her puppies like a queen counting her court. Milo toddled across the floor, discovered his own reflection in a pot, and nearly fell over in surprise. Daisy sat upright, practicing a bark that still sounded like a squeak. Jack sat on the floor beside them, his brown coat draped over the chair now, his plaid shirt sleeves rolled up. He held a warm towel and gently wiped Milo's face when the puppy wandered too close to the water bowl and fell in with the dignity of a man slipping on ice. "Smooth," Jack told him. Milo sneezed. Daisy barked as if laughing. Jack shook his head, smiling in a way that felt unfamiliar but right. A knock came at the door. Jack's shoulders tensed for half a heartbeat old instinct. Then he breathed out and walked to open it. Ray stood on the porch holding a paper bag of supplies. Behind him, at the end of the driveway, Madison Pierce waited near her SUV, hands clasped, not approaching without permission. Ray lifted an eyebrow at Jack. "She wants to talk." Jack looked past Ray at Madison. Madison's eyes were red-rimmed, her face bare of makeup, her posture smaller than before. She held something in her hands, a thick envelope and a set of dog supplies-like offerings. Jack didn't invite her in. Not yet. But he stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him so the cabin's warmth stayed with Luna. Madison swallowed hard. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. I want to make it right." Jack studied her, then glanced through the window where Luna's silhouette was visible near the fire. "Making it right," Jack said quietly, "takes time." Madison nodded, tears spilling. "I know." Jack didn't soften his voice, but he didn't harden it either. "You can start by telling the truth again if they ask. Every time. No excuses." Madison nodded harder. "I will." Jack held her gaze for a long moment. Then he stepped aside, just slightly. Not an invitation into his cabin, but not a closed gate either. In the doorway behind him, Luna appeared, limping, proud, watching. Madison's breath caught. She lowered her eyes, humbled. And Luna, goddess of the winter road, did not forgive her. But she didn't lunge, she didn't growl. She simply stood there, alive, unbroken proof that abandonment did not get the last word. Jack looked at Luna, then at Madison, and the lesson settled over the porch like sunlight on snow. Some people throw love away, thinking it's disposable. But love, real love, does what winter can't. It stays. On the cabin porch, where the storm finally ran out of breath, Jack stood in the clean winter light. Luna lay at his feet, and Milo and Daisy curled close like two small prayers that had decided to live. And the ending carried a truth that didn't shout. It whispered like God often does. Some miracles don't arrive with thunder. They arrive as a cardboard box left on a frozen road. God doesn't always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends a weary veteran with a wounded past, and a mother dog with enough love left to stand guard anyway. Sometimes he places the right soul at the right mile marker, so what was meant to be thrown away becomes the very thing that saves someone else. In everyday life, everyone has a winter of their own, a quiet house, a lonely morning, a heart carrying grief, a worry no one sees. And this story is a reminder that when a person chooses compassion instead of turning away, they open a door for God to move. A small act, a pause, a helping hand, a gentle choice, can become the thread God uses to pull someone back from the edge. If someone watching today feels tired, discouraged, or alone, let this be a simple promise. God sees you. God has not forgotten you. And sometimes the sign of hope is small, like Daisy's tiny, squeaky bark in the storm. Not impressive, not polished, just brave enough to say, "Don't give up." May God bless you and your family. May He protect you on the slippery roads of life, heal the wounds no one knows about, and place a Luna beside you, a loyal love, a friend, a quiet miracle, so you don't have to walk through the cold alone. And if this story touched your heart, even a little, please help spread the miracle. Like this video to support the story. Comment below. Do you believe God still sends miracles, quiet ones, into ordinary days? Or share a moment when kindness saved you. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story, because these are more than tales. They're reminders that love still shows up, miracles still happen, and God is still working, especially in the winter. God bless you.